Right.
Right.
Okay. So he dreams, Paro has a dream, 7 heavily fleshed cows, good looking, come out of the Nile. Then another 7 cows come out emaciated, terribly looking, and they stand alongside the cows, which are healthy looking. Now holding Dalit. Vatochalna haporos ros hamare v'dakos haboser. Ei sheva haporos ivos hamara brios. The cows, which are bad looking, which are thin fleshed, they eat the 7 cows, which are good looking and healthy. Vikatz Paro. Paro awakens. So Rashi himself cites the Chazal, Vatachalno, Simin Sheikol Simchas Hasovet Nishkachas Bimei Arov. It's an indication that the joy of the plenty will be totally forgotten. It is important. I would say we find the plenty that Egypt experienced was one of a kind in the history of existence. It's like we find in terms of Yitzchak, there was a famine and he was about to leave Canaan. Hashem says, don't leave, remain in the land. And that year, which was a year of famine, Yitzchak plants and he has 100-fold yield of what a normal yield is, not during a famine year. It's unheard of. 100 times what normally would grow during a normal year. It was Me'ah She'arim. That's what Torah says. It was 100-fold of what normally. The planting in Egypt is every person, whatever his harvest was, it was multiples what a harvest is normally. And as it says that when Yosef ultimately was appointed viceroy, they stored away the grain to the point there was so much stored away, there was no number to be able to evaluate the bounty in terms of that's how abundant it was. So you can imagine what it was. And this is what the government put away and what the people put away. It was a level which was unheard of. What was the whole idea of Yosef? Yosef, usually when a person, years ago, what our grandmothers and our parents used to say to us, you have to save for a rainy day. You can't live high on the hog believing that this is going to be forever, because you never know. If God forbid there's a downturn and you spend your reserve, what are you left with? So you should always put away something significant that in the case there is a downturn. What about you've had one good year after another good year and you believe it's never going to stop? So psychologically, you're not storing away the grain. Yosef himself understood factually, and he explained it to Paro understood this, that it's coming to an end. And when it comes to an end, it's going to be so bad that all the bounty and the joy and the sense of security that once existed, it will be so extremely negative that it's as if it never existed to that degree. The land will be so parched and so needy, so therefore you must store away the grain, because psychologically they would not do it, they'd be forced to do it. And Yosef did gather the grain and stored it away, but the people were advised. And as we said yesterday, they did, but Yosef decreed that the grain should rot because he wanted them to circumcise themselves. As we mentioned yesterday, the name of the Rambam in the Mor Nevuchim, in Guide for the Perplexed, that a person who's uncircumcised, his sexual drive is overwhelming. Once you remove that foreskin, it curbs the sexual drive. Yosef, preparing Egypt for the exile, he wanted to elevate the quality of the Egyptian people, that they shouldn't be immersed in promiscuity to some degree, to refine the society of Egypt, that it should have a less of a negative impact on us. That was the idea. So if they would have had the grain, I said, they came to Paro, they complained. He says, you appointed a madman. It's unheard of. He wants us to circumcise. He says, why don't you store the grain? He says, because he rotted, our grain should rot. He decreed it should rot. He says, what will be if he decrees that we should die? You better listen to what he's actually telling you to do. And all the Egyptians had themselves circumcised. Otherwise, he would have sold them the grain and they would have died of starvation. It says, what did the emaciated, thin-fleshed cows, after they swallowed up the healthy-looking cows, and it wasn't noticed that they even swallowed them up. So he says, that the joy of the bounty will be forgotten during the famine years. It's not like even a fond memory. Nothing. You find people who at one time were wealthy and they bought themselves quality clothing. And even after they lose it all, they still wear those clothing that they purchased at one time. But you see, it's not recently purchased. The sleeves are slightly worn. The suit doesn't look like, or the sport jacket and the shirt and the tie. But still, there's a remnant of what? Of the past. When the famine hits, there's not going to be a trace. You wouldn't believe that these people ever were way up there financially, secure. But we see something here. What does he say? The sova will be forgotten. Rashi cites the Chazal, Simchas HaSova. The joy of the plenty will be forgotten. Those joyous years. So we see over here that besides having the financial wealth, there is a what? There's a joy psychologically, emotionally, you're a different type of person. That is crucial. We say, Ezu Asher Hasomech Bechelko. Who is the wealthy person? The person who's satisfied with his lot. You could have a person who has very little, but if he's satisfied with his lot, he's in a good place. Person has everything, but he's still holding on to that first dollar he ever earned. That person, all he sees is what he doesn't have. The man has no happiness in his life. Emotionally, mentally speaking, it's as if the man lives like he's impoverished. So we see the Simchas HaSova, and that's what later it's pointed out that when do we have Ayin Hara? When does evil eye exist? If people are needy and lacking, they're always looking to see what the other person has. But if a person is so overwhelmed with his own success, he has no time, he has no reason to look at anyone else because he's too preoccupied earning his own fortune. When the Egyptians originally had this overwhelming bounty, the whole concept of Ayin Hara didn't exist because they had no reason to look at what the other one had because they were totally consumed with accumulating their own fortune. However, when they no longer had, then everybody's looking, as we said, into everybody else's pot. What does he have? Maybe he has more than I have. That's when Ayin Hara comes up. I always say the United States, initially, it was a land of plenty, bounty, unlimited bounty. They had here in the United States, didn't exist in the world. And the United States thrived and boomed financially in every sense of the word. Why? Because the whole idea of Ayin Hara almost didn't exist. The opportunity, it exists, of course, it exists at some degree, but to compare to anywhere else, it was much less because people were so occupied because there was such opportunity available, unlimited opportunity, without even cash investment. The government was giving away land. Lands were being given away. All kinds of opportunities, unlimited, which was unheard of. Therefore, that's the reason why the society in the United States boomed, because there was no Ayin Hara. People were not looking at one another, what they had, because they were too preoccupied with what was available for themselves. That was the idea. But he says over here, the Simchas HaSova, the joy of the Sova will be forgotten. So we see over here the whole concept of, we say, Ezu Osher, a person who's satisfied. Doesn't say the person who's satisfied. Hasomeach bechelko. It's interesting. Rashi over here says, when their bounty There's simchas hasova. Because when you have that kind of bounty, it's not possible not to be happy. Ezu asher hasomeach bechelko. You're happy with your lot, not just satisfied with your lot. You're happy. The happiness component is crucial and key to a person's level of sense of success. And if that happiness is not there, then you're lacking, because then you worry. But if you already reached the point of happiness, that means you've arrived.